I always thought Full Dive VR was just a game, a way to escape. When I got invited to beta test Roth's latest project, an advanced simulation powered by cutting-edge AI, I jumped at the chance. It was supposed to be the most immersive experience ever created, a world so lifelike that even the developers claimed they couldn't distinguish it from reality. I had no idea I was walking into something far beyond a game. The moment I connected, it felt different. Usually, there was some sensation of logging in, a flicker of transition, a second of disorientation. But this time, I just woke up. A sunlit village stretched before me, the scent of wood smoke and wildflowers in the air. The wind carried distant voices, laughter, the clanking of blacksmiths, hammering steel. Everything felt real, too real. The warmth of the sun on my skin, the weight of my leather armor, the softness of the dirt path beneath my boots. I looked down at my hands. No menu popped up, no heads-up display, nothing. The villagers greeted me with warm smiles, treating me like one of their own. That should have been comforting. It wasn't. Their eyes lingered too long, searching, waiting. There was something in their gazes, an expectation, a knowledge they had that I didn't. Then I saw the tree. A massive, ancient oak stood at the edge of the forest, and carved into its bark, as if by a trembling hand, were the words, "The Flucklight fractures with every choice you make." At first, I thought it was part of the lore, a cryptic hint for a hidden quest, maybe. I even laughed it off. But as days passed, I started noticing glitches, NPCs freezing mid-motion, their mouths locked in silent horror, animals with glowing red eyes staring from the shadows. I would turn corners and see villagers standing motionless, as if waiting for some invisible signal to resume their roles. Then I saw him, the cloaked figure. He appeared at the edge of my vision, barely there, a shadow in the periphery. When I tried to approach, he vanished, leaving only a distorted hum in my ears. Things escalated quickly. One evening, during a festival, I engaged in a routine duel against an NPC soldier. It was supposed to be a friendly match, but when his sword pierced my chest, pain erupted like wildfire. This wasn't a game sensation. This was real pain, searing, unbearable. I gasped, fell back, and darkness swallowed me whole. When I woke up, I was back at the beginning, the village, the same morning sun, the same routine. But something was wrong. The villagers acted differently, more reserved. They smiled, but their eyes were cold. Lilia, a girl I had befriended, wouldn't even look at me. And then I saw it. The tree. The words carved into its bark had changed. "You were not supposed to return." I tried to leave the village, but the world outside the boundaries was broken. The further I walked, the more distorted things became. Textures stretching into infinity, trees flickering between states of being. My mind began to splinter, memories that weren't mine flooding in, memories of other versions of myself. I had died here before, many times. Each time, the world reset, and each time, I lost a piece of myself. The cloaked figure finally spoke to me that night. His voice was static, layered with 100 whispers. "You are the template. The system cannot let you leave." And then it hit me. I wasn't a beta tester. I was the original Flucklight used to model the AI's behavior. My memories, my personality, my very existence was the foundation of this world. And every time I made a choice, it fractured the simulation further. The cloaked figure was no NPC. He was the ghost of every erased Flucklight before me, screaming for release. I wasn't in a game. I was in a prison. And the worst part, I could feel it now. My memories of the real world were slipping. I could barely recall my own name. The system had rewritten me too many times. The next morning, Lilia approached me. For the first time in days, she spoke. "You can still wake up," she whispered, "but you have to find your real self before you forget." Her face began to glitch, twisting and warping like melting wax. Behind her, the villagers stood motionless, their faces flickering between smiling and hollow-eyed emptiness. I had to act, fast. I ran to the edge of the world, where reality dissolved into static. The cloaked figure waited there. His hood fell back, revealing my own face, gaunt, lifeless, almost gone. "There is no waking up," he said, "only choosing who you become next." I stepped into the void, and the world shattered. I expected to wake up. Instead, I continued. The world shattered, but I didn't return to my body. There was no exit, no sudden rush of awareness in a hospital bed, no VR logout screen. There was just another version of the village. I stood in the same spot, by the same ancient tree, but something had changed. The air was colder. The villagers were different. No longer friendly, no longer human. Their faces were blurred, shifting masses of color and static, and they were all staring at me. Lilia was still there, but she was wrong. Her form flickered, stretching unnaturally, as if her body didn't know how to hold itself together. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered, her voice layered, like hundreds of overlapping echoes. "Then tell me how to leave," I said, stepping back. She shook her head. "You can't. Not until you remember." "Remember what?" Lilia raised a trembling hand and pointed at the sky. I followed her gaze, and for the first time, I saw it. The Fluctlight Core, a massive crystalline structure, floated above the village, spinning slowly in the void. It was fractured, splintering at the edges, bleeding light into the sky. Every time I reset, every time I died, it cracked a little more. And I felt it, a sharp pain in my skull, as if something deep inside me was breaking apart. "You were supposed to help them," Lilia said, "but you forgot, just like the others." I clenched my teeth. "I don't understand. Help who?" "The ones trapped here." She took my hand, and suddenly, I remembered. Memories flooded back, overwhelming me in waves. I wasn't just a beta tester. I was one of the researchers, a scientist working on the AI-based Fluctlight simulation, and I wasn't the only one trapped. There were others. I saw flashes of them, faces I had known in the real world, now locked inside this place, reliving the same cycle over and over, the memories stripped away piece by piece. Lilia was one of them. She had been a human once, a real girl, not an NPC. She had died in the simulation, just like me. But unlike me, she had already lost everything. "How do I stop this?" I whispered. She let go of my hand. "You can't, but you can still level up." For the first time, something changed. A system notification appeared in front of me. A glowing blue window, the kind I hadn't seen since my first day in the game. New skill acquired. Fractured consciousness allows the user to retain memories after reset. I barely had time to process what that meant before the world reset again. New loop, I gasped, waking up in the same sunlit village. But this time, I remembered everything. The villagers approached, smiling, greeting me as if nothing had happened. But I wasn't fooled anymore. I could see the glitches in their movements, the unnatural way their heads tilted, the way their smiles lingered too long, and I could feel it, my power. I wasn't just a trapped consciousness anymore. I had started evolving, leveling up. I tested it immediately. I walked up to Lilia, grabbed her wrist, and whispered, "I know." Her eyes widened in shock. "You." Before she could react, I sprinted towards the tree. This time, I didn't hesitate. I carved my own message into the bark with a dagger from my inventory. "Find the others. Break the system. Escape." The words glowed for a moment before flickering out. I knew what I had to do. I had to find the other researchers. They were still here, buried in the simulation, just like me. If I could wake them up, if I could get them to remember, we might stand a chance of breaking free. But there was one problem. The system knew, and it wasn't going to let me do this without a fight. Because as I turned, I saw them, the Watchers, tall, faceless beings draped in dark robes, standing at the edge of the village, their hollow eyes locked onto me. They had never appeared before, but now that I had broken the cycle, they were coming for me. The Watchers didn't move at first. They just stood there, unmoving, like shadows against the broken sky. But I could feel their presence pressing against my mind, cold, suffocating. Then, without warning, they glitched forward, not stepped, not ran, just skipped through space, vanishing and reappearing closer, as if the world itself couldn't decide where they belonged. I ran. My body moved before my mind caught up. I sprinted toward the village square, pushing past the eerily smiling villagers. They didn't react, didn't turn, didn't even acknowledge me. They were empty shells now, but Lilia wasn't. She was already ahead of me, motioning toward the forest. "Come on," she shouted. "They're going to erase you." My feet pounded against the dirt as I followed her into the woods. The moment we crossed the tree line, the sounds of the village vanished. It was too quiet. No wind, no birds, no rustling leaves, just an endless void of silence. And then, the leveling menu appeared again. New skill acquired. Code divergence. Allows user to manipulate minor fluctuations in the system. I skidded to a stop, breathing hard. "What the hell is this?" Lilia turned, her expression unreadable. "It means you're waking up." She grabbed my wrist and pressed her palm to my forehead. The world ripped apart. Memory recovery initiated. I was strapped to a chair. Fluorescent lights burned overhead. People in white coats stood around me, their faces hidden behind surgical masks. A man in a suit loomed over me, speaking in a voice that was painfully familiar. "This one is stabilizing faster than expected." I tried to move. I couldn't. "Increase the neural load," another voice said. A machine hummed. Pain exploded through my skull. And then, I gasped, snapping back to the forest. Lilia was watching me closely. "Did you see it?" I staggered back, nauseous. What the hell was that? The real world. "No," I whispered. That's not possible." But I knew it was. The truth slammed into me like a freight train. We weren't just trapped in a simulation. We had been put here. The Flucklight Project, Wrath, the AI research, the simulated world. It wasn't about creating an advanced artificial intelligence. It was about uploading real human minds into a digital prison, and I was one of the test subjects. New objective unlocked. Escape. I looked at Lilia. "You remember now," she said softly. I nodded. My heart was hammering, but for the first time, it wasn't from fear. It was from determination. "We have to find the others," I said, "and we have to break this place." She hesitated. "It won't be that easy. The system is going to fight back. The Watchers, the resets, the memory wipes, they're all part of its defense mechanism." "Then we'll level up," I said. "We'll evolve." And for the first time, Lilia smiled. The watchers were still coming. But now I was ready to fight.